Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Saturday, November 18th. Today is day 43. I'm the Executive Director of Churches for Middle East Peace, and I would encourage you, please go to our website, www.cmep.org, to see ways that you can engage and contribute towards peace in the ongoing struggles, battle between Israel and Hamas, and to end the bombing of Gaza. Lots of updates. I'm not going to lie. Things are starting to run together in terms of what I've told you, what I haven't. So if I repeat myself, I apologize. For me, early in the morning on Friday, before I had gone to bed Thursday night, I got a text at about 12:30, I think. It said, I got a text from someone in Gaza, and it said, there's no comms, there's no communications. All cell phones and internet are down. And the person was running on an eSIM from an Israeli network. And they said they didn't know how long it would work. And that had been the only message I'd received since Tuesday. And so the big issue is that there is a communications blackout in Gaza, which has detrimental effects on the already catastrophic situation there. People can't call ambulances. Humanitarian groups can't be in touch. Development groups can't coordinate with their staff. There's an inability to be able to count. So there has not been an updated death toll or the number of injuries. And that is just, a tertiary issue to the fact that people are dying every day. The statistics are that a child in Gaza is dying every 15 minutes. News this morning reported that there has been ongoing bombardments, that the military incursion and the ground invasion has continued. So since November 16th, at about 1600 hours, and this is their local time, and as of 2200, I don't do military time, on November 17th, contact in the Gaza Strip. Since then, so the 16th, contact's been largely cut off. Landline, cellular, internet, because of fuel. There's not fuel to run generators and telecommunications. As a result, flash updates are minimal. So we don't have information about many of the humanitarian realities. Casualty figures have not been updated since November 11th. That's a week. So the statistics we have are still more than 11,000 people, more than 4,500 children. On November 17th, so that's yesterday, Friday, Israeli authorities informed UNRWA that as of the 18th, today, they would allow the entry into Gaza of 60,000 liters of fuel, which is about 37% of the fuel needed to support humanitarian operations, including food distribution and the operation of generators at hospitals and water and sanitation facilities. I have not heard that fuel is limited in its usage, which would be a significant improvement. That would be 37% of the fuel needed. Now, we've yet to hear if that's been received. They would allow, doesn't mean they have allowed, but that is at least some incremental good news. Some bad news. There have been no humanitarian supplies for 3 days. No humanitarian trucks, no supplies have confirmed to be entered into Gaza as on November 17th. So for the 17th, yesterday was the third consecutive day of no trucks. UNRWA, the UN Refugee Agency's inability to receive and distribute additional loads because of the lack of fuel compounded by the shutdown of telecommunications. There was one truck carrying a small amount of fuel was said to have gone in. 3 days, remember, 500 trucks a day to meet the basic needs. 3 days, no trucks. The World Food Program reported an increase in cases of dehydration and malnutrition. There's a threat of starvation due to a collapsed food supply chain and insufficient aid delivery. Only 10% of necessary food supplies have entered Gaza since the beginning of hostilities. On November 17th, also the third day, Israeli troops accompanied by tanks were operating within the Shifa Hospital compound. This morning in the news, it was reported that the Shifa Hospital was being evacuated. The Israeli military said that the Palestinians and the doctors and that the hospital had asked to be evacuated. That was what the Israeli military said. The Palestinians said, and I don't know if this came from Hamas, I don't know which Palestinians, but the Palestinians said, absolutely not. It was demanded of us that we evacuate by the Israelis. And all along, I will say, the Palestinians, the civilians, the doctors, the people in the hospital have said, we can't evacuate. How can you evacuate sick people? How can you evacuate a hospital? So it seems unlikely that the Palestinians civilians, that the doctors, that the hospital would have asked to be evacuated. So that was just reported in the last few hours. It's about midday. I'm here on the East Coast in Washington, D.C. 40 patients since November 11th, including 4 premature babies, have died at El Shifa Hospital because of the lack of electricity. This is a lot of these updates are from OSHA, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Hospitals and medical personnel are specifically protected under international law, and all parties in the conflict, Hamas and Israel, all parties must ensure their protection. Hospitals must not be used to shield military objectives from attack. They should not be used by Hamas. That is condemnable, and they should not be used by the Israeli military. Any military operation around or within hospitals must take steps to spare and protect patients, medical staff, and other civilians. All feasible precautions must be taken. So this is a major issue. Hospitals are shut down. And I've reported the last couple of days about what's been happening at Ali Hospital, which is the Anglican hospital. I would encourage you, late last night on the East Coast, Churches for Middle East Peace put out a statement about the detrimental effects of everything that's happening on the Christian community. We have a legitimate fear if this continues, the Christian community will be decimated in Gaza. It's less than 1,000 people, and Christians are dying every day. In the past 24 hours, there have been intense ground clashes between Israeli forces and Palestinian armed groups around Gaza City. And that's in the north, and in Khan Yunis and east of Rafah in the south. Intense strikes by Israeli forces also continued in the south, and Israeli ground troops have maintained the effective severance of the north from the south along Wadi Gaza, except for the corridor to the south. That was the road where all of the refugees came down. I will also note that we have heard that pamphlets have been distributed in Khan Yunis in the south and other parts of the south from Israel that have been in Arabic that have called on people in the south to evacuate again. I don't know how prolific. I don't know if it's only in parts of the city or if it's been in the whole area, but another call for evacuation in the south. They have not said where people could go, and people have already been displaced. 1.4 million people moved south, and they moved to the middle of Gaza, and then they moved further south. So many of the refugees, 1.6 million people displaced already in Gaza. Many of them have moved once, twice, or even more. And now they're being asked to move again, which is deeply disconcerting because it could be an indication that Israel's military plans are moving further south. Water and sanitation, as of November 16th, which would have been Thursday, UNRWA, the refugee agency, said 70% of people in the south have no access to clean water, and the fuel needed for desalination was not present. There have been no distribution, none, of bottled water among internally displaced people for more than a week. If you listen to this, I would encourage you to tweet some of these facts and statistics. And if you want to cite the evidence, you go to OSHA OPT, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs for the Occupied Palestinian Territories. All of this evidence is cited. No distribution of bottled water for more than a week to the internally displaced people in shelters for UNRWA for more than a week. And there are grave concerns about dehydration and waterborne illnesses. Hostages continue to be held. It's believed that number is 237. I think that I have talked about this, but the death toll, it's believed in Israel, is around 1,200. There was an adjustment a few weeks ago. Initially, the numbers were about 1,400. Then that as people and as Israel began to understand who specifically had died on October 7th, that number was lowered to 1,200. There have been some deaths of Israeli military. I heard that there were a few days this week where there were no military casualties in Israel, or at least one day I read that. And so the death toll in Israel is somewhere between 1,200 and 1,400, but that's why there's a differential in those numbers. The other thing I wanted to mention to you that I can't recall if I told you, in the West Bank, this is actually a prison that is in between Jerusalem. It's right outside of Jerusalem. It's called Ofer Prison. It's an Israeli prison that is connected to the West Bank. It opens to like Ramallah on one side and the Israeli side on the other. It's called Ofer Prison a few days ago, and this has not been widely reported. I don't know that I've even seen it in Western media. A few nights ago, 20 prisoners were released from Ofer Prison into the West Bank, and they were stripped bare, naked, stark naked, before they were released. And there was some consideration that this might have been a precursor to the release of some hostages. You might remember that there was a discussion mid last week about an exchange of 50 hostages, women and children, in exchange for prisoners that are held under administrative detention. That fell through. And so I did want to mention that those prisoners had been released because it's not known, and it's unusual for there to be several prisoners released unless it has to do with some type of negotiation. I wanted to close by just talking for a few minutes about what it means to be a peacemaker. And I'm learning, this is hard. This is hard. And, there are people I love and people I'm friends with on, I split my time in a small community between there and Washington, D.C. And there are people I love and I care about deeply, and they are very angry at me about my positions. And they disagree with me strongly about things I'm saying and about the fact I call for a ceasefire. And I've said this before, might God soften our hearts and help us to not do this work out of anger. I think we can be angry when people don't have water, and we can be angry when people are going hungry, and we can be angry when people are killed. But when we're responding to people who disagree with us, might we not do violence? And it is an act of peacemaking to be able to, in love, enter into conversations with people who disagree with us. And that is a challenge, but it is also an opportunity. And I'm challenging myself to do that. And I would invite you to do that. It is a transformational journey. And might Jesus transform our hearts to be able to do that better. If you decide to do that, might we, and I'm speaking to myself, might we do that humbly? Might we do that seeking to listen? And it's hard to listen when people we love are hurting. And so I'm not saying justifying pain, violation of human rights. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying compromise on that. I'm not compromising on calling for a ceasefire. I'm in touch with the White House every day. And may I say, we're starting to make small progress. Now I'm in touch every day. And we're starting to get responses. We really are. Small. I was in a State Department meeting this week, and I was talking about death. And there were U.S. government officials with tears in their eyes talking about people dying in Gaza. That's not an exaggeration. I tell you that people, the U.S. government is being moved, at least people within it. So might we be humble? Sorry, I'm taking a long time. I don't mean to. Might we be humble? Might we listen? Might we try to create space to understand where people are coming from? Might we do it from a centered space? Hard to do that, I can tell you, when I'm not sleeping. I'm probably getting last night 3.5 hours, a night. One of the things that can be frustrating for me in conversations on the internet is everyone thinks they're an expert. They all know many things. I have 3 master's degrees. I have 2 doctorates. I have a PhD on this issue. People call me an expert, and may I tell you, I am not. I have so many things to learn. So let's be humble. Friends, none of us are experts on this issue. And what you think you know a lot less than you think. I promise you. So maybe let's assume that we don't know as much as we think. And may we be open to the fact that we have some things to learn. Let's ask God to expand our hearts, not only being empathetic with people with whom we disagree, but asking God to expand our hearts to show love and kindness to any person who's experiencing pain, loss, fear, insecurity as a result of this war and this conflict. We have to deconstruct false binaries. It is time for us to say enough. Enough killing of Jewish people. Ever. Enough. I stand with the Jewish community in saying enough, never again. And when the Jewish community says enough, never again, I say I heed that cry and say enough, never again. Not one more Palestinian baby should die. Not one more Palestinian grandmother. I'm going to start crying again. I'll stop. Okay. There are not 2 sides to this conflict, Israelis and Palestinians. There are those who are for peace and those who are not. And when we say, enough, I stand with the groups that are saying no more Jewish deaths, no more Palestinian deaths, that does not mean I am compromising on Palestinian aspirations to end the occupation and to end the blockade of Gaza. I am standing for human rights for Palestinians. That's not a false binary. Those are not contradictory beliefs and claims. So I want to give you just a snapshot of something that happened in my life this week. This was midweek. I was on an international news interview. And I didn't really know before I went on it was going to be a debate. I was next to a conservative academic from a DC think tank, a very conservative DC think tank. And he said, because I support a ceasefire, I support Hamas. He said, I'm supporting terrorism and the destruction of Israel, which I am not. I condemn Hamas. And I believe it is in Israel's best interest to end the occupation of the Palestinian people and to end the bombing of Gaza and to figure out a way forward that is a peaceful way forward for the sake of Palestine and for the sake of Israel. Needless to say, I was astounded. And he went on to say that all pro-Palestinian protests are pro-Hamas protests, which is something we are hearing a lot. And I responded and said that, just the things that I believe. And that supporting a ceasefire is it's the only way forward to end violence against all people, against civilians, to end violence by Hamas, to end violence by Israel, to end babies dying because of incubators running out of electricity. A ceasefire means taking positive steps forward toward peace. On that very same day, and this was on social media, I had someone who was, so I was criticized for being, supportive of not only Palestinian rights and things like that, but of supporting, the aspirations of terrorism. I mean, how horrific, right? In that very same day on social media, I had someone who wrote this: "You are so deceiving. Shame on you. You call yourself a Christian. You know the problem is the occupation and ethnic cleansing, and that it didn't start on October 7th. Hamas is only an excuse to commit genocide. You are a hypocrite. This is not about Hamas. It's about Palestine. Be truthful to Christ and humanity." And when I experience these juxtapositions of being criticized for being supporting, of terrorism, and then being criticized for being supportive, to saying I'm complicit with genocide, that's when I know that I feel like Christ is in the middle, right? And I don't know if that's an encouragement to you. And I thought maybe I shouldn't have shared that because I really am not trying to make it about me. But I want to be an encouragement to you because these conversations are so hard. And thank you for staying in it. So I would encourage you, we put out a statement yesterday, and maybe I'm repeating myself, about Christians and Christians disappearing in Gaza. I'll talk about that tomorrow on Sunday. But I wanted to share these words with you from Cardinal Pierre. We were with him this week, and I'll share these words again tomorrow in larger context. But these are the words he said, and this is what I want to close with because I thought they were so beautiful. He said this. I wrote him a letter, and he wrote me back. He's the Catholic cardinal who is the nuncio, he's the ambassador to the United States for the Vatican. And he wrote these words. He said, in view of the violence that with sorrow is occurring every day in the Holy Land, I commend Churches for Middle East Peace in its continuing mobilization of Christians to be advocates of justice for all people in the Middle East. As Pope Francis remarked, the Messiah's great power does not come from the force of violence, but from the weakness of love. And this is Christ's power. It is love. Jesus gives us the same power, the power to love in his name, and to love as he loved. And he said, may you and everyone involved in the work of CMEP, which I feel like is all of you. If you watched me being this verbose, you are involved in the work of CMEP. So may you and everyone involved in the work of CMEP know the blessings of the Prince of Peace. So may you be blessed as you seek to be a peacemaker.